Would you like to understand what a meaningful conversation is? And what are the characteristics of a meaningful conversation? Then listen to this entire video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, how to reduce suffering in life, which is very much connected to meaningful conversations because that is how you build personal relationships with people, which helps in dating, for example, and understanding yourself, which is vital for self-development. Let's get into it. So what is a meaningful conversation to start off with? Let's define it. In my eyes, a meaningful conversation is when you talk to somebody and they are talking to you and you are talking to them on a human level. And with what I mean with that is they are treating you as a representation that is very close to who you truly are. Hence, the conversation is on a truthful, real basis. The person is also accepting you to a degree of who you are. And there's this theme that it is the topic of the conversation and the frequency, the energy level of it is close to the truth, to what is real, to what reality is. Now that's a whole different topic of what real and what reality is, but there's something about it that is special. And if you speak on a truthful level, it is powerful. Now, these conversations, meaningful conversations, are connected to sort of the idea of you lose track of time when you have it because you're so engaged. Meaningful conversations are very engaging, and there you lose track of time, you're sort of in the zone. And they also keep you thinking of the conversation once you leave the conversation. So the topic or what was said is running in your head after the conversation ends. And that's what distinguishes a meaningful conversation from the rest. Now, I would say there are a few key components to what makes a conversation meaningful. And you don't necessarily need to tick all of these attributes in order to make it meaningful, but I do believe the more characteristics you fulfill in the conversation, the more meaningful it becomes. So let's get into it. The overarching goal of a sort of how to build a meaningful conversation is to make it truthful and close to reality as possible. There are certain ways to do this and certain characteristics of how this manifests itself. Let's start with number one. If you ask personal questions, you take a first step to making the conversation meaningful. Now, this is key because your personal life is one of the realest aspects of your life and therefore very close to the truth. It isn't, obviously it may be uncomfortable to ask somebody personal questions, but if you do it in a calm, relaxed and neutral, understanding manner, then it is easier for people to open up and sort of speak on a truthful level. Now, why is it difficult? Because, well, people are afraid that you will use what they say against them if they tell you something vulnerable or so, which is totally understandable. But if you show vulnerability yourself, which I will get to in a second, it enables you to get personal information out of the other person and for them to open up. And this is so important because, as I said, you are talking on a truthful, honest level, which is quite rare, actually, I think. Anyway, as I said, showing vulnerability is also very key. If you show vulnerability, you display who you really are as a person, which is the truth, close to the truth, to what is reality. And if you are sensitive, emotional, fragile, which you are, because you are an emotional, sensitive, fragile being, you portray who you really are, which is close to the truth. And when you show vulnerability, very importantly, you enable the other person to open up also, because you exchange this how do you say, this sensitive information, which is it's a gesture of trust. And when somebody does that, it's easier for you to trust them in return. And the conversation consequently spirals towards a meaningful level because you're speaking on a human emotional level, which is real, which is true. Next point. The conversation should stand out. Meaningful conversations are in short supply. Because of their short supply, their value is automatically higher, and it stands out as sort of a peak moment, and that's what makes them special. So if you think for yourself, what would make a conversation stand out? Of course, think in pleasant terms. You don't want to sort of do or say anything weird, because you can stand out in weird ways which aren't necessarily desirable. But think in terms of what would make this conversation stand out in a personal, emotional, meaningful way, and do follow that train of thought, and ask questions that are open-ended, because this enables the other person to think for themselves and truly process their own perspective without you projecting a bias or your own opinion onto them and forcing them to say something that is not who they truly are. So you really enable them to explore themselves on a true representative basis. You're really letting them think of who they really are and what they stand for, and what they desire, what's missing in their life. That's very important, because it's very easy to sort of impose your opinion onto someone else, and if they don't want to sort of conflict against your beliefs, they will easily then sort of adopt your perspective without really considering their own, just because they don't want to create tension with you, let's say. So let them think for themselves and face the truth, let's say. Now, in the next video, I will go more into the specific tips on how to set up a meaningful conversation. Here I talked about ask open-ended questions and talk about personal things. Those are it's just like the starter to get into a meaningful conversation, but in the next video I'll get into more tangible, specific steps. So, in conclusion, a meaningful conversation stands out, and it is a representation of who you truly are, and that's what makes it special. And these conversations, these talks are quite in short supply. That's what makes them so valuable. So please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like this video and you'd like to learn more about self-development, how to reduce suffering in life, and also dating. So thank you for listening.